My name's Scarlett Johansson, and the day I turned 18, my mom threw my suitcase onto the porch and told me I was ruining my sister's future. 5 years later, I was sitting in a corporate interview room, and the next applicant was my sister. If you've lived something like this, share your experience in the comments. Friday nights at the grocery store don't end early. By the time I clocked out, the manager had already killed half the lights, and the parking lot was slick with spring rain. My phone buzzed with one missed call from Mom. That wasn't unusual, so I drove home anyway, tired. Mom and Dad's place sat in a quiet suburban row outside Chicago, the kind of street where people wave and still judge your lawn. The porch light was on. Right in front of the door, my suitcase leaned against the rail, zipped, tagged, and looking like it had packed itself. Fingers stayed on the handle as I hauled it up the steps, thinking maybe Dad had moved things around. The lock clicked before my key reached it. Mom swung the door open and filled the doorway with her robe and her face set hard. Dad hovered behind her, arms crossed. She didn't bother with hello. She pointed at the suitcase like it was evidence. "You're not coming back in," Mom said. "What are you talking about?" Dad didn't move. "You turned 18, Mom snapped, and you've done nothing but make Ava ashamed. You're ruining her future." Her voice carried down street. Mom shoved something into my chest, a thick envelope, not mine, paper edges bent like it had been crumpled and smoothed out. "Look at this," she yelled. "You did this. You made her lose everything." "What is it?" "Don't play dumb. Don't wreck her." Dad stared at the driveway instead. The front had Ava's college name printed in blue and a red marker line slashed across a date, April 15th. The number hit harder than her yelling. "I've never seen this," I said. Mom's jaw tightened. "You held it. You signed it. Don't lie to me." Rain dripped off sleeves. My eyes went to the doorbell unit over her shoulder, the one that usually blinked when someone moved. "It's been busted for days," Dad muttered. I reached past Mom for the hall table. "My wallet, my ID." She slammed the door halfway. "There's nothing of yours here." Her hand locked. Ava appeared in the hallway, barefoot, hair in a messy bun like she'd been studying. She didn't look at my face, only at the envelope. "Don't make this harder," she said. "Ava, just stop." She turned and walked away like the floor had a schedule she needed to keep today. I stood the suitcase up and ran the zipper the last few inches, slow, loud. "At least you're punctual," I said under my breath. "Punctual about throwing me out." Mom raised her phone. "She quit school. She ruined it," she said, loud enough for me to hear. Dad nodded once. Mom ended the call and pointed at the sidewalk. "Go," she said. "Don't stain Ava's day." The bus dropped me at 26th Street with my suitcase bumping every crack in the sidewalk. Marisol Vega's building sat above a bakery, and she buzzed me up without asking questions. When the door opened, she looked at the envelope in my hand, then at the suitcase, then at my face. "Crash here. But don't sign anything while you're panicking." That was her version of a hug. She cleared a spot on the couch, slid me a towel, and pointed to the bathroom like she was running a small, practical airport. By Saturday morning, I was back in a uniform, picking up weekend shifts at a warehouse that paid cash and didn't ask for a resume. The supervisor barely learned my name before handing me a box cutter and a pallet list. Between breaks, my phone kept vibrating on the metal table, each buzz another person who suddenly cared about my character. Aunt Linda wrote, "How could you be so selfish? Your sister is about to attend a prestigious school." "I'm safe. I'm working." That was all she got. By the second shift, someone had already heard Mom's version through church friends and Facebook cousins. A guy on the line asked if I'd really dropped out to party, then pretended it was a joke. My manager pulled me aside near the loading dock. "Look, Scarlett, keep your family drama out of here." People get nervous when they think someone's unstable. He said it like he was doing me a favor. That night, on Marisol's couch, dinner was ramen and a packet of crackers from her pantry. While the noodles softened, my thumb scrolled past Mom's latest post. Ava smiled in a college hoodie, one of those staged campus visit shots, and the caption read, "Proud of our girl." Comments piled up, hearts, prayer hands, congratulations, strangers calling her destined. A spoon clinked against the bowl, and the only thing that came out of my mouth was, "Pride really is a free meal." Marisol didn't comment on the post. She came back from her room with a cheap spiral notebook and a pen that had a bank logo on it. Write it down. Date, time, who said what, and what papers are involved. She tapped the notebook twice, like she was starting a job. Then she pointed at my suitcase. Also, count what you have left. The list wasn't long. Sunday afternoon, I tried to rent a room off Craigslist, the kind where you share a bathroom and pretend you don't hear your roommate's phone calls. The landlord sent an online application link and asked for $25 for the screening. The site flashed a warning about irregular credit activity and told me to verify my identity. My finger hovered over the pay button, then slid away. Marisol listened from the kitchen while I called the number on the back of my debit card. After 10 minutes of menu prompts, a representative came on the line. "Can you confirm your mailing address?" "The one on file should be correct," I said. She read it back as my parents' house. "And I'm seeing a recent credit card application under your name." I didn't apply for anything. The rep kept her tone flat as she listed the last 4 digits and the opening date. It matched the week Mom started calling me a disappointment in public. Marisol set a mug of coffee in front of me and didn't offer sympathy. "If there are papers, they didn't grow legs," she said. "Collect proof. Don't argue feelings." The rep transferred me to the fraud department and scheduled an in-person verification. "Monday morning, 9 a.m., bring photo ID," he said. The envelope from the porch was crumpled in my hand, and the photo I'd snapped showed Ava's school name and a red line over April 15th. Marisol nodded at the notebook. "Write that date down," she said, "and write who kept your ID." Later, my work schedule sat open beside the bank appointment, and an email from community college waited. Night classes. A simple form. The cursor parked on Submit, while the fields asked for an address and a driver's license number. I didn't have either one. Monday came fast. Marisol slid a bus pass across the counter and pointed at my notebook. 9 sharp, she said. The branch on Kedzie was already busy, a line of tired people clutching folders like lifelines. The guard waved me through the metal detector, and a young teller at the service desk called my name. Her badge said Kelsey. She asked for my ID. I had my school card and a worn debit card, nothing else. Kelsey frowned, then nodded anyway, and led me to a cubicle with a printer. She pulled my profile and typed without looking at me. Paper slid out in neat stacks. Kelsey highlighted 3 lines with a yellow marker. New card application, she said. Mailing address on file, she said. First purchase. The address was my parents' house, the one Mom had just locked me out of. The application date sat 2 days before my birthday. Kelsey kept talking, explaining policies, but the numbers made the yelling on the porch sound rehearsed. When I asked who submitted it, she shook her head. Not on this screen, she said, and turned the pages toward me. My hands didn't shake until I saw the first purchase location. The location was a campus bookstore across town. Kelsey printed the application copy and slid it over. That signature looks like yours, she said carefully. It did, in the way a practiced imitation does. The S was mine. The tail was wrong. I asked for a copy. We can give you a dispute packet, she said. Before she could, her screen prompted security questions. She read one aloud. Your mother's maiden name? Today, I said. Put down unknown. Kelsey blinked, then typed, lips pressed, and kept her voice neutral. She stapled everything, stamped the top page, and slid it back. Outside, I called Ava. It went to voicemail twice before she picked up. Hey, she said, like she was answering a stranger. I need to ask you something, I said. Did you apply for anything in my name? A pause, then a sigh. Mom said, don't make this a big deal. Is there a reason my credit report thinks I opened a card? Please, she said, just stop. The line died. A second later, Mom's text popped up. If you blow this up, Ava won't go to school. Enjoy your reputation. I didn't reply, just tucked the phone away and walked. Back at the desk, Kelsey handed me forms with checkboxes and fine print. Dispute, fraud claim, and a credit freeze request, she said. She circled the mailing address line and the application date, then wrote a reference number on a sticky note. I asked what happens if the account keeps running. It can keep reporting until it's investigated, she said. The sticky note felt heavier than it was. I called Marisol from the lobby. They found a card, I said. Marisol didn't raise her voice. Good. Now you document. Then you lock your credit. Then you get your ID today. Instead of going back to work, I took the bus to my parents' street. The suitcase stayed at Marisol's, but the bank packet rode in my backpack like a weapon I didn't know how to use. Mom opened the door before I could knock, as if she'd been waiting. You here to apologize? She asked. I'm here for my wallet and my birth certificate, I said. Her eyes flicked to the papers. Trying to punish your sister? The doorbell unit above her shoulders stayed dark. Dad appeared behind her, blocking the hallway with his body. Ava's voice from the kitchen. I stepped forward anyway. Who opened a credit card in my name? I asked. Mom's smile came quick and sharp. You're jealous, she said. You always were. Answer the question. Dad shifted, shoulder against the doorframe. Don't, he warned. Not at her, at me. Ava stood at the sink, back turned, stirring something without looking up. Tell her to give me my ID, I said. Mom lifted her phone. You're trespassing, she said. I'll call the cops. The dispatcher picked up as Mom stared at me, and I backed down the steps. The fraud packet crinkled in my grip, hard. Mom kept talking to the dispatcher while I stood at the curb, backpack straps cutting into my shoulders. Dad stayed in the doorway like a bouncer who didn't get paid. When the patrol car finally rolled past, it didn't even slow down, but the message landed anyway. Don't come back. The next day, the guy from the Craigslist room called. Hey, Scarlett, your screening came back weird, he said. We're going with someone else. He hung up before I could ask what weird meant, like he'd already decided I was contagious. Work didn't go better. The warehouse supervisor waved me over, not angry, just inconvenienced. You missed part of Monday, he said, and I got a call from somebody saying police were involved at your address. I wasn't arrested, I said. Doesn't matter, he replied. Corporate doesn't like headaches. We're cutting you off the schedule. My badge got taken like it was a library card. By lunchtime, my phone looked like a telemarketer convention. Mom's church friend left a voicemail about forgiveness. Aunt Linda texted a Bible verse and a thumbs up, as if scripture was a payment plan. Another cousin wrote, "Stop sabotaging Ava." The same phrase kept showing up, copied and pasted, as if Mom had emailed them a template. Marisol came home from her shift and watched me delete messages without reading. Keep them, she said. Screenshot everything. The notebook sat open on the coffee table, and my handwriting started to tilt, from speed, not emotion. The envelope from the porch went on the table, too. I flattened it and lined up the dates with the bank printout. April 15th was circled on Ava's school document, and the first charge on the new card hit April 14th at a campus bookstore. 1 day apart. Mom hadn't screamed about my sister's future because she'd cared about my sister's future. She'd screamed because the bill was due and my name was on it. A letter from the bank arrived at Marisol's address, forwarded after I changed what I could. Temporary restriction was the phrase. My checking account wasn't closed, just held in place while they reviewed suspicious activity. My paycheck from the grocery store hit and then sat there like it was being punished. The ATM declined me twice. The cashier at Walgreens looked bored when my card failed, which somehow made it worse. Marisol didn't offer money she didn't have. She pulled a crumpled sheet from a drawer and slid it across the table. Legal aid numbers, a credit bureau hotline, and a checklist in her block letters. No magic friends, she said. No miracle aunt. This is paperwork. She pointed at the line that said, freeze credit, and then at my phone. Start calling. We sat with the bank packet and broke it down like a school project. Address listed as my parents' house. Application date before my birthday. Branch code, teller ID, and that off-looking signature. Every line ran back to Mom controlling the mailbox and Dad pretending not to see it. The dead doorbell recorder meant there was no proof of her locking me out or refusing my ID. On paper, I was just a dramatic kid who walked away. Calls started coming from numbers I didn't recognize. "Is this Scarlett Johansson?" a woman asked. "This is a call about an outstanding balance." "I'm disputing it," I said. "Ma'am, are you refusing to pay today?" "I'm refusing to take responsibility for fraud," I answered, and hit record on my voice memo app without telling her. By Friday, I had a folder, a log, and a stomach that didn't care whether I ate. Marisol drove me to a squat brick building with a sign that read, "Legal Aid Chicago." The lobby smelled like copier toner and tired patience. At the front desk, my hand shook around the folder, but my voice stayed completely flat. "I need to schedule an intake for identity theft," I said, and stepped forward as the door clicked shut behind me. Morning at Marisol's started with the refrigerator door hanging open while I stared at 3 sauce packets and a half-empty bottle of mustard, the kind of meal you only call a meal when you're trying to convince yourself you're fine. My phone lit up on the counter with an unknown number, then another. The banking app still showed the same message from days ago, temporary restriction. Marisol walked past in her work shoes, hair pinned back, already moving like the day had made its demands and she'd agreed to meet them. She didn't ask how I slept. She handed me a banana and took the phone when it rang again. "Scarlett is unavailable," she said. "No, she's not refusing anything. Send it in writing." She ended the call and set the phone down like it had germs. Legal Aid called later with an intake slot. Marisol drove me back to the same brick building because buses were slow and time mattered now. At the front desk, a tired receptionist slid a clipboard over without looking up. The forms asked for identification numbers I didn't have access to, addresses I couldn't prove, and a family contact I didn't want to list. A pen hovered over the page anyway. A staff attorney finally waved me into a small office and introduced herself as Ms. Bennett. She spoke like someone who had heard every version of "my family would never" and stopped believing in that sentence a long time ago. "Tell me what happened, but keep it to dates and documents," she said, "not feelings." So dates came out. Birthday, suitcase, envelope with April 15th circled, bank appointment, mailing address set to my parents' house, signature that looked close enough to be dangerous, the dead doorbell unit, my wallet and birth certificate stuck behind a locked door. Ms. Bennett didn't nod in sympathy. She just wrote, fast. When she asked who controlled the mail, my throat tightened in a way that felt dumb and unhelpful. The answer still came out. "My mom," I said. "Trish." Ms. Bennett leaned back, then pushed a packet toward me. "Today, you stop trying to win an argument," she said. "You build a record." That sentence landed harder than anything Mom had yelled. Mostly goals, she said. Say them out loud. "Dispute the fraud with the bank and the credit bureaus," I said. "Get my papers back the legal way. Get stable, school, work, not waiting for my mom to decide I'm allowed to live." Marisol nodded once, like I'd finally spoken a language she trusted. She pulled a folded sheet from her purse and wrote 2 things on the top margin of my notebook, a name and a branch code. "Kelsey," she said. "Kedzie branch. That's who printed your file. And this number is the transaction reference." It wasn't rescue. It was a handle. The next few hours turned into tasks that felt ugly but necessary. At a post office kiosk, I paid for a P.O. box so mail would stop going to my parents' address. At the bank, a different teller helped open a basic account with what little identification I could scrape together, and my grocery paycheck got rerouted. On the phone, the credit bureaus walked me through a freeze, one by one, like locking windows after a break-in. Calls came anyway. Aunt Linda, a church friend, a cousin I hadn't seen since middle school. "Your mother is devastated," one woman said. "You're punishing Ava." "Send me anything you want to say in writing," I told her, and ended the call. The notebook got another entry: date, time, caller, claim. Back at Legal Aid, Ms. Bennett had me sign an authorization form so she could request records. My hand moved steadily across the lines, even though the idea felt like stepping into a new role. Not the daughter trying to be understood, but the person filing a dispute. She told me what the price would be. Your family will frame this as betrayal, she said. Employers don't like complications. And this won't fix itself quickly. I know, I said. She pointed toward the copier room and handed me a stack. Make 3 sets, she said. Timeline first, then documents. The copier whirred while I fed in pages. The porch envelope photo, the bank printouts, the restriction notice, the written log. Each time the machine spit out a sheet, I stamped copy in the corner, like it was a promise I could actually keep. Ms. Bennett stepped into the doorway and spoke over the noise. We're sending a subpoena request to your mother's address, she said. Ms. Bennett doesn't wait for a reaction. She walks over to the copier, flips to a page in my stack, and taps the top line with her pen. Your mother's address is where the statements went, she says. We're requesting the mailing change history, the application method, and the signature verification notes. Hard records, Marisol stands by the door with her arms folded, like she's bracing for bad news but refusing to flinch. Ms. Bennett slides a legal pad toward me and starts listing items in plain language. Dates, branch code, reference number. The kind of checklist that doesn't care who gave birth to who. A week later, the bank calls me back. The fraud department rep sounds apologetic in that corporate way that means nothing good is coming. Ms. Johansson, because the account activity ties to a household address and there's a family dispute element, the investigation may take longer, he says. It can be treated as a domestic matter unless we receive additional verification. So it's not fraud, I say. It's unresolved, he corrects. After I hang up, Ms. Bennett asks for one more thing. Have you ever signed papers your mother handed you without reading? The answer comes out before I can dress it up. Yes. She doesn't lecture. She opens my notebook and points at a line I wrote on day 2. Mom always handled the mail. Then she points at another line. My wallet and birth certificate were withheld the night I got locked out. That's control, she says, not protection. The envelope from the porch gets relabeled in my folder as what it actually is, a payment deadline. Not a scholarship, not an acceptance, not some sacred future. Just a due date that happens to sit next to Ava's school name like a prop. The first charge on that card lines up with it too neatly to be an accident. Another form arrives from the bank, this one requiring a signature comparison. Ms. Bennett asks me to sign a sheet 3 times. My hand moves across the page, and the sample looks like mine because it is mine. Then she holds it next to the application copy. Same loops, different pressure, like someone practiced until it passed at a glance. Marisol drives me to the Kedzie branch for a statement letter. Kelsey is there, eyes widening when she recognizes me. She keeps her voice low. I can print what I'm allowed to print, she says. I can't accuse anyone. I'm not asking you to, I reply. Kelsey hands over a transaction summary and a note that lists how the application entered the system. The method is vague, the kind of label that covers online, phone, and in-person assistance. It's not the smoking gun I want. Ms. Bennett looks at the page and nods anyway. It's a start, she says, but we need something that can't be argued into dust. 2 days later, a white envelope shows up at my P.O. box with my mother's name and the return address. Not a letter, a copy of a police report receipt. The description reads like a stranger wrote it. Adult female, refused to leave property, created disturbance, history of volatile behavior. My stomach drops, but my hand stays steady long enough to staple it into the folder. Ms. Bennett reads it and sighs through her nose. She's building a paper trail, she says, to make you look unreliable. The next call is from Dad. He hasn't reached out since the porch. Your mother says you're trying to destroy the family, he says. I'm trying to get my identity back, I answer. He clears his throat, the sound he makes when he wants the conversation to end. I don't know who opened anything, he says, but you've been intense. You always demand money. I demanded my wallet, I say. He doesn't respond, and the line goes dead. Legal aid tells me what I already feel in my bones. This is bigger than one account. Mail control, document control, reputation control. Ava's future is just the easiest phrase to say out loud, the one that makes everyone else clap along without asking for receipts. A notice arrives the following Monday. Mandatory appearance, tied to the report my mother filed. A date, a time, a location. My name printed like a warning. My phone buzzes immediately after with a text from Mom. If you want to play law, I can play law. At Marisol's table, the folder opens again. The subpoena request list sits on top, and a red pen rests in my hand while I start circling the next targets. Mail forwarding records, signature verification logs, and every place my mother ever used my name, before the ink even dries. Ms. Bennett met me in the lobby of a downtown office building with a thin smile and a thick binder. A receptionist checked our names off a list and handed us visitor stickers. Across the room, my mother sat upright in a plastic chair like she was waiting for applause. Greg stood behind her, hands in his pockets. Ava wasn't there. A woman in a blazer led us into a conference room. A bank representative sat at one end, a credit bureau liaison at the other, and a clerk typed at a laptop without looking up. Ms. Bennett nudged my folder forward. Everything said today becomes part of the file, the clerk said. Ms. Bennett slid my timeline across the table first, pages clipped and dated. The porch night, the envelope, the bank appointment, the address, the report Mom filed, the credit freeze, every phone call logged. Mom leaned in and sniffed like the paper offended her. "This is ridiculous," she said. "She's doing this to hurt Ava." Ms. Bennett didn't argue. She tapped the line where the mailing address matched Mom's house. Ms. Johansson's statements were routed here, she said, and the account was opened 2 days before her 18th birthday. Mom lifted her chin, already warming up for her favorite role. "I was trying to take care of my youngest," she said. "Scarlett quit school. She embarrassed us. She's always been resentful." Greg cleared his throat and offered his weak support. "She gets worked up," he said. "She demands money. I don't know who did what, but she's intense." Ms. Bennett looked at the clerk. "Please note the witness statement," she said. Mom turned toward me like she expected tears. "Tell them the truth," she said. "Tell them you're angry because Ava is going somewhere you couldn't." The bank rep shifted, uncomfortable. The credit bureau liaison glanced down at my file, then back up. Ms. Bennett nodded once, like she'd been waiting for Mom to finish. "Now we move to the audit log," she said. That was the second beat. She handed over a bank printout with the internal notes attached. One line showed the application channel and the phone number used for verification. Another line showed the request to keep all correspondence at the household address. The phone number on the page ended in the same 4 digits Mom had used for years, the one printed on the back of every church flyer she'd ever passed out. Mom blinked hard. "That's our home number," she said. "So what?" Ms. Bennett didn't raise her voice. "So the system shows your number was used to authenticate an account opened in your daughter's name," she said. "That's not an accident. That's a choice." Mom's face tightened, and her tone slid from righteous to sharp. "I needed it handled," she said. "You don't understand what it costs to keep a family afloat." Ms. Bennett reached into her binder for the third beat and set it in front of the bank rep first. Kelsey's signed statement, dated, with the branch code and transaction reference, confirming the signature on the application, did not match my in-person verification signature. Attached behind it was the mailing change history the bank produced after legal aid's request, showing my mother's address set as the destination before any statements ever left the building. The bank rep read, then looked at Mom. "Mrs. Johansson, do you have an explanation for this discrepancy?" he asked. Mom's voice rose, then wobbled. "I did what I had to do," she said. "Ava had deadlines. You think scholarships wait? You think bills wait? I'm her mother." That was the moment the story finally stopped being about Ava. It turned into the only honest sentence Mom had said all month. "I'm her mother, so I can." Bennett pushed one more page forward, a copy of my certified letter requesting my identification documents, marked "Refused at delivery" to Mom's address. "And you refused to release her ID," she said, "which prevented her from renting housing and enrolling in school." Mom's mouth opened, then shut. The clerk kept typing. The keys sounded steady, like a metronome nobody could argue with. Mom tried one last time. I was doing it for her future, she said. My voice came out level. Then next time, make sure the future signs its own name. The bank rep slid a form toward me and pointed. Sign here to separate liability pending investigation, he said. The account will be flagged as suspected identity theft. He turned to Mom. Ma'am, this matter is being referred to our fraud unit, he said. You'll receive contact from them. Do not attempt to access this account again. Mom stood too fast, chair legs scraping. Greg touched her elbow, then pulled his hand back like she might snap at him. Ms. Bennett gathered her binder while I kept my pen moving, signatures clean and consistent, line after line. Life didn't magically get easier after that, but it got clearer. Days became work wherever I could get it. Nights became GED prep at a community college lab, then classes that started after dark. When the business degree finally came through, it wasn't framed. It went straight into a folder for applications. A corporate recruiter took a chance on me, entry level, and I treated every policy like it was oxygen. By 23, I was the one reviewing resumes instead of begging landlords. On a Tuesday afternoon, my calendar said interviews from noon to 4. The conference room smelled like printer paper and cold coffee. I clicked through the applicant tracking system, finished my notes, and hit next. Ava Johansson filled the screen, and my hand stayed on the mouse. The conference room calendar block still sat open on my laptop. Noon to 4, back to back. My notes from the last candidate were still on the pad beside my coffee. I clicked next and stared at the name until my eyes stopped trying to turn it into something else. My coordinator knocked once and opened the door. "Your 2:00 is here," she said. "Send her in," I replied. Ava stepped through the doorway like she wasn't sure she was allowed to take up space. She looked older than 23 should, not in a glamorous way, just worn down. One hand gripped her purse strap like it might float away. The other held a folder with wrinkled edges. She sat when I gestured, then glanced at the nameplate on the table. Her face drained. The air got heavy without anyone saying a word. "Hi, Ava," I said, the same tone I used for everyone. "Thanks for coming in today." She swallowed and nodded once. I opened her resume on the screen and kept my eyes there. "Let's start with your recent roles," I said. "Walk me through what you've been doing since your last position ended." Ava's fingers tightened around the strap. "It was complicated," she said. "Family stuff. I had to help at home." "Okay," I said. "And before that, you were an office assistant for 6 months. What tools did you use day to day? Scheduling, spreadsheets, ticketing systems?" She blinked like she hadn't expected a real interview. "Mostly answering phones," she said. "Some Excel, nothing advanced." I nodded and wrote it down. "This role involves vendor coordination and weekly reporting," I said. "Tell me about a time you had to manage deadlines that didn't move." Ava's mouth opened, then closed. "I'm good under pressure," she said. "I just need a chance." The silence between us wasn't dramatic. It was practical. It was what happens when someone wants the job title more than the work behind it. I asked about her gap. I asked about the certification listed without a date. I asked about a reference who didn't answer the phone number on the form. Ava gave soft answers that floated around the questions instead of landing on them. Halfway through, she leaned forward. "Scarlett," she said, voice lower, like saying my name could change the rules. "I know this is weird." "It's a professional interview," I said. "We'll keep it professional." Her eyes flicked toward the door. "Mom said, your mother isn't part of this process," I cut in. "Here, we talk about experience and skills." Ava's face tightened, the same look she'd had in the hallway years ago when she told me not to make it harder. "I'm trying," she said. "I really am." I looked at the checklist I used for every candidate. Requirements, preferred experience, notes. The system didn't care about family history. It cared about whether the person could do the job without someone else holding the rope. "One last question," I said. "If you're assigned a task you don't know how to do, what's your first move?" Ava hesitated. "I'd ask for help," she said, "from whoever's in charge." "Thanks," I said. I closed the folder and slid it back across the table, the motion slow and ordinary. That's the end of my questions. Her shoulders lifted like she was bracing for impact. So, am I getting it? Not for this role, I said. The experience gap is too big, and I can't make exceptions. Ava's eyes went glossy, but she didn't cry. She just sat there, stunned, like the word no had never been aimed at her without padding. I reached into the drawer and pulled out a one-page sheet we gave to candidates sometimes, a list of free training resources and our company's entry-level pipeline. I placed it on the table between us like it was a receipt. We have a career development program, I said. Orientation classes, basic Excel modules, interview coaching. Sounds familiar, Ava muttered. I didn't react. My coordinator's phone rang outside and her voice carried through the thin wall. No, ma'am, you can't speak to hiring. I understand who you are. No, you can't come up. A few minutes later, as Ava stood to leave, I saw my mother through the glass doors in the lobby, planted near the elevators with her purse clutched high, eyes scanning for someone to blame. Security approached, spoke to her, and guided her back toward the exit. She argued with her hands. The doors didn't budge. Ava stopped at the threshold and looked at me like she wanted a rescue that wasn't coming. You kicked me out of my life, she said, barely above a whisper. I smiled, small and controlled. You were right, I said. I did change your future, just not the way you thought. After she left, I returned to my desk, clicked her profile, and selected Close. Then I opened my contacts, found Trish Johansson, and pressed Block while the screen stayed lit.